President Rodrigo Duterte on Thursday says he has accepted the resignation of Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre.
I accepted the resignation of Vit Aguirre. I have a fraternity brother as Secretary of Justice.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says Senior Deputy Executive Secretary Menardo Guevara has been assigned as Acting Justice Secretary. Aguirre's resignation comes after weeks of speculation he was on his way out of the cabinet. Roque said changes in the cabinet were underway due to Duterte's dissatisfaction with some secretaries. Aguirre back then said he did not feel alluded to by the president's statement. Talks on Aguirre's departure from the Duterte cabinet started mid-March when the Justice Department panel of prosecutors dismissed drug trade charges against self-confessed drug lord Kerwin Espinosa and his alleged partner in the Visayan drug trade, Cebu-based businessman Peter Lim. Lim was among the first to be named as drug lords by Duterte himself early in his administration. The dismissal of charges against Lim and Espinosa raised doubts on the legitimacy of the government's war on drugs. Duterte was supposedly furious over the dismissal of charges and had joked about putting Aguirre behind bars if charges against Espinosa and Lim are dismissed with finality. This prompted Aguirre to form a new team to conduct a new investigation. Lim is scheduled to appear before the DOJ on April 12 for new hearings. Metro Manila's top cop will be the next Philippine National Police Chief. President Rodrigo Duterte on Thursday says National Capital Region Police Chief Oscar Albayalde will replace PNP Chief Ronald De La Rosa. Albayalde and De La Rosa were batchmates at the Philippine Military Academy, belonging to C. Nagtala class of 1986. Before serving as Metro Manila Police Chief, Albayalde headed the Pampanga Provincial Police Office. De La Rosa's term extension by 3 months ends this month. De La Rosa is set to head the Bureau of Corrections after he leaves the PNP. Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno wants 4 Supreme Court justices to inhibit themselves from the quo warranto petition filed against her. Sereno says Associate Justices Diosdado Peralta, Lucas Bersamin, Francis Hardeleza, and Noel Tiham cannot decide on the matter objectively and impartially. The Chief Justice files 4 separate motions before the High Court for the 4 justices to inhibit themselves from the quo warranto proceedings. Sereno's lawyers in a statement say, quote, all of them testified against the Chief Justice in her impeachment case pending before the House of Representatives and actively participated in the so-called Red Monday protests in the SC that called for her resignation. They add, quote, the Chief Justice said that Peralta, Hardeleza, and Tiham must be excluded from the quo warranto case for showing actual bias against her. During the impeachment hearings of the House Committee on Justice, Peralta testified that Sereno should have been disqualified as a candidate for Chief Justice for failing to submit to the Judicial and Bar Council her statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth for the year she worked as a professor at the University of the Philippines. Sereno says Peralta's bias apparently stemmed from his belief that she was the one who decided to exclude his wife, Court of Appeals Associate Justice Fernanda Lampaz Peralta, from the list of applicants for CA presiding justice in 2017. She says Peralta himself admitted this in at least 2 impeachment hearings. Sereno says Hardeleza showed bias against her when he testified before the House panel that Sereno allegedly manipulated a 2014 JBC shortlist that excluded him. She adds there is reasonable basis to conclude Hardeleza harbored ill feelings towards her. On Tiham, Sereno says the Associate Justice said she was clearly liable for culpable violation of the Constitution for refusing to participate in the impeachment process. She also says Bersamin exhibited bias and animosity towards her when he alluded to her as a dictator while criticizing Sereno's leadership style before the House panel. The High Court will hold oral arguments on the quo warranto petition in Baguio City on April 11, which Sereno will attend. Vice President Leni Robredo asks the Supreme Court, sitting as a presidential electoral tribunal, to consider ballot ovals shaded by a minimum of 25%, not 50% based on outdated standards, as votes for her. Robredo says this will prevent a systematic decrease in her votes, especially in her bailiwick of Camarines Sur. The PET on Monday began the vote recount for former Senator Bongbong Marcos's electoral protest against Robredo. Robredo's lawyers say the application of the 50% threshold will only serve to disenfranchise the valid votes cast by a voter. The Commission on Elections itself implemented a 25% threshold percentage for the 2016 elections. This means that if a ballot oval is shaded by 25%, the vote counting machine will count it as a vote in the corresponding candidate's favor. In the 2010 elections, the threshold percentage set by the COMELEC was 50%. But the PET said it will follow this 50% threshold percentage in the recount of Robredo and Marcos's votes. Cambridge Analytica, the British political consulting firm at the center of the Facebook data leak scandal, also had a hand in the 2016 Philippine presidential race. The Philippines' national elections were conducted in May 2016, 6 months before the United States election that put Donald Trump in power. Facebook Chief Technology Officer Mike Schrofer on Wednesday says data of more than 1.17 million Filipino users was improperly shared with Cambridge Analytica. The Philippines is only behind the US in terms of the number of people whose data was compromised. Cambridge Analytica harvested the data of millions of Facebook users to create software to predict and influence voters' choices at the ballot box. The parent company website of Cambridge Analytica, Strategic Communications Laboratories or SCL Group, shows it has 13 offices worldwide, including the Philippines. Cambridge Analytica CEO Alexander Nix was in the Philippines in the lead-up to the country's elections. Former journalist and now Presidential Communications Undersecretary Joel Eggco covered Nix's visit for the Manila Times. The article said Nix was in the country for a research. Eggco, who was then the president of the National Press Club of the Philippines, wrote Nix was a guest of the NPC. In Eggco's article, Nix talked about new strategies and tactics that are products of behavioral micro-targeting, psychographic profiling, predictive analytics, and many other modern tools. Psychographic profiling and behavioral micro-targeting were the precise techniques used by Cambridge Analytica in the Trump campaign, and apparently in the Philippines, according to Facebook's disclosure of Filipinos' compromised data. Recordings emerged in which Nix boasted of his data company playing an expansive role in Trump's 2016 campaign. He was suspended by Cambridge Analytica after that. Eggco now works for the administration of President Rodrigo Duterte. He denies any knowledge of links between Nix and Duterte when he wrote about Nix in 2015. A report by the South China Morning Post says Cambridge Analytica helped the campaign of President Rodrigo Duterte. SCMP's report says the website's archived version boasted of its role in rebranding its client as a strong, no-nonsense man of action who would appeal to the true values of the voters. While Duterte was not mentioned, this is the image adopted by the presidential candidate during his campaign.